All of my clocks say we still have a couple of minutes, so we can't really start before 4.
I have 2 minutes also, Nancy. I was giving her a 2-minute head start for Holly.
I'd have in council chamber 358, just about to turn to 359, so we do have another minute. And it does seem that the live stream has just started, so we'll just wait for the clock to hit 4, and I'll let you know, Mr. Chair, and you can begin.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have 4 o'clock in council chamber, so you may begin.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this meeting. This is an electronic hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing at home will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Town of Pelham Council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet, of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands and information has been provided on the town's Committee of Adjustment webpage. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should an application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to participate in the meeting. If you have pre-registered to speak during the public portion of the application, you will be brought into the Zoom meeting and will be unmuted. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. Please be advised that once you have finished speaking, you will be removed from the Zoom meeting room. If you are live streaming at home and wish to submit a comment during an application, you may do so by emailing clerks@pelham.ca. At the conclusion of the public portion of the meeting, these comments will be read into the record. If you submit comments after the public portion has been closed, your comments will not be considered. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for the conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of the hearing. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. If you wish to be provided a copy of the decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. The Secretary Treasurer's contact information is available on the upcoming PowerPoint presentation and available on the town's website. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances, and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for a consent application. This meeting is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is also being live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. You may wish to put your view on gallery view by clicking the top right corner from speaker view. We ask that you are mindful of background noise for the duration of the meeting. Committee members are asked to mute their microphones until you are asked to speak. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak and vote by raising your hand. Please note that attendees who have registered will remain in the waiting room via telephone or electronically until their application of interest is brought to the committee. Those participating online via Zoom will be asked by the chair to raise their virtual hand when they wish to speak. On a computer, you can do so by clicking participants in the bottom center of the screen and then by clicking raise hand. On a mobile device, you can tap raise hand in the bottom left corner. You will then be called upon to speak and your microphone will be unmuted by staff. If you are participating by phone, you will be unmuted by staff when the agenda item that you have registered for is being discussed. Applicants, agents, and attendees are advised that they are free to leave the webinar once the decision has been made. Today's panel includes myself as Chair, Don Cook, Member John Clausen, and Member Sandra Marsh. We also have in attendance town staff, Mrs. Nancy Bizzato, who is Clerk and Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, and also Mrs. Holly Wilford, who is the Deputy Clerk of the Town of Pelham and also the Assistant Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. It may be necessary on some of the hearings, the applications you're hearing, we will have our planning department represented by maybe Mr. Curtis Thompson. With that being said, committee members, does any member of the committee have any pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications being considered at this hearing? Mr. Clausen. Mr. Clausen?
No.
No. Mrs. Marsh?
I have none.
And I also have none. Ms. Wilford, have there been any applications for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there are not.
Thank you very much. We will now consider the first application in front of us. It is a variance application. It is variance application A28-2020, 1 Highway West. Assistant Secretary Treasurer, would you please go through sections of the planning report?
Thank you. Committee of Adjustment hearing Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. All Town of Pelham in-person Committee of Adjustment hearings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all Committee of Adjustment hearings electronically via Zoom. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Participants are reminded, ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you'll be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you'll be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and video cameras will remain off until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphone will be muted. Once voting on an item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given an opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address public comments or concerns at one time. Application for minor variance. File A28/2020P, 1 Highway 20 West. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the northwest corner of Highway 20 West and Pelham Street, known municipally as 1 Highway 20 West in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 6.16DI, ingress and egress, minimum two-way drive aisle width to permit a drive aisle of 6.25 meters for the two-way traffic, whereas the bylaw requires 7.5 meter drive aisle for two-way traffic. Section 19.3A, maximum residential gross floor area to permit not more than 80% of the gross floor area, whereas the bylaw allows for not more than 50% gross floor area, and whereas the property received a minor variance approval to allow not more than 75%. Section 19.3B and 20.1C, dwelling unit to the rear of ground floor behind commercial. To permit a dwelling unit behind a commercial use, whereas the bylaw requires a dwelling unit shall only be permitted above the ground floor of any commercial use. Section 20.2C, maximum lot coverage. To permit a maximum lot coverage of 48%, whereas the bylaw allows 40%, and whereas the property received a minor variance approval to allow 42%. To date, the following comments have been received. Niagara Region, no objection to this minor variance application from a provincial or regional perspective. Subject to the satisfaction of any local requirements, regional staff note that the requirement for filing a record of site condition should be addressed prior to the issuance of building permit. NPCA, no comments. Building Department, building permits are required. Public Works Department, no comments. No public comments were received at the time of writing this report. Is the variance minor in nature? Reducing the minimum drive aisle is minor, as the parking area will still function well and allow for safe and practical movements of vehicles. Further, the drive aisle is being reduced in only one location where the pavement is wider, where the stripping for the access to the accessible parking space is located. Allowing the residential unit on the ground floor behind the commercial units will not affect the appearance of the building, as commercial along the frontage and commercial uses are still being provided at grade. Increasing the lot coverage will not negatively affect the function of the site, as adequate space for appropriate parking, pedestrian connections, and amenity space for the new residential dwelling unit and storm water can be appropriately managed. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? Reducing the minimum drive aisle will allow for a more efficient use of the parking area while facilitating some outdoor amenity space for the ground floor residential unit. Allowing the residential unit on the ground floor will facilitate an additional residential apartment dwelling in a desirable location and support existing and future commercial uses. Increasing the lot coverage will allow for an improved building design and site function in a key location in downtown Fonthill. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? Reducing the minimum drive aisle as the parking area will meet the requirements of Policy B1.2.4.5 relating to parking areas in the downtown. Allowing the residential unit on the ground floor will facilitate an additional residential apartment dwelling within the downtown designations where residential intensification is encouraged and residents can work close to where they live and access services by active transportation. Increasing the lot coverage will facilitate development of the mixed-use building, which is supported by the downtown designation. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Reducing the minimum drive aisle maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the parking area will function appropriately and allow for two-way movement of traffic through the parking area. Allowing the residential unit on the ground floor maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as residential uses are permitted in the GC zone of commercial use will still occupy the majority of the ground floor with the appearance being commercial along the property frontage. Increasing the lot coverage will facilitate the development of the site for a mixed-use building which is permitted use in the GC zone. Planning staff understand the proposal to be an ideal application for current planning and development goals outlined by upper levels of government and local town policies dealing with appropriate intensification, redevelopment, and land use diversification. The proposal will add housing supply to downtown Fawn Hill, enhance the streetscape, and increase the property's value and thus tax productivity while making more efficient use of an existing lot on a fully serviced public street. Planning staff is of the opinion that the application meets the 4 minor variance tests laid out by the Planning Act. The subject application is consistent with provincial policies, the regional official plan, and complies with the general intent of the Pelham official plan and zoning bylaw. Planning staff recommend that application number A28/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant, that all necessary building permits are required to the satisfaction of the chief building official. Prior to the issuance of building permit, provide revised drawings for the site plan agreement to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. At the time of building permit, the filing of a record of site condition to the satisfaction of the chief building official. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fawn Hill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, and jbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have the agent in the room. That's Mr. Craig Rowe. And we do have, I believe, Mr. Todd Barber was the designer, and he's also here representing the applicant.
Well, thank you, Holly. Mr. Rowe, do you wish to add anything to the report?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Not really much to add today. Myself from Upper Canada, representing the planning portion of this, and with us, Todd Barber, representing the design function. We've read the staff recommendation, and we're in support of it, and we agree with the applicable conditions. And I think the only parting comment I'll add before I invite Mr. Barber to add his comments is really we were ready to execute the site plan. The developer, working with Mr. Barber's team, found some small ways to make the design work a little bit better, look a little bit better, contain some enhanced architectural and urban design elements. And overall, we feel that with these additional variances being applied, overall results in a much better development. So those are my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but I'll defer to Mr. Barber now if you'd like to be specific about anything.
Mr. Barber, you wish to add any comments for the information of the committee? Is Mr. Barber with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Just had to get used to using the Zoom function there. Yeah, much to what Craig has said, we were invited in to sort of tweak the design and look for some opportunities. One opportunity that we found most significantly, which then triggered some of the call for variances, was the addition of another residential unit at grade. I think, Mr. Cook, you were involved in the original variance and could probably recall that there was a porte cochere to park underneath that was, we had 2 stories of residential above the ground level, and it was just void at grade. And that seemed like the perfect opportunity to give someone a beautiful place to live at the ground floor with a sensible courtyard kind of corralled in between the new building and the old mast that used to be Keith's Restaurant. So with that in mind, we shifted some parking around to make that feeling when you're looking at your ground floor windows more sensational by creating a substantial amount of garden and green space. And then that led to some larger canopies to cover some of the entrances, just thinking about the pedestrians that are going to use the commercial space and the main entrance for the residences. And so all of those little things that were kind of triggered by the ground floor residential lead to these additional minor variances which tweak the ones before. So hopefully you like the idea of what we've added and can support the application as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. I guess, Holly, have we had any pre-registered participants wishing to speak on this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have any pre-registered members of the public, but if you would just let me check the clerks at pelham.ca email, I will let you know if anyone has emailed in any comments. I can confirm, Mr. Chair, that it is 4:16 and we have not received any public comments. So if you'd like to close the public portion of the meeting and move into committee input, that would be fine.
Thank you, Holly. Yes, with the help of the committee, we will close the public portion of the meeting. Any members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Barber or Mr. Rowe?
My question, I mean, is Keith's Restaurant, it's still going to be, it's not going to be torn down. It'll be right next door to this. So it'll still stay.
Okay. Mr. Chair, yes, it's understanding that that building will be remaining.
I was down there and I'm looking, and Keith's wraps around. So I see you're going to have, will there have to be some demolition there to get the parking in at the back in the alleyway there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Clausen, there's no revision to the Keith's building or any of their existing infrastructure to facilitate this development. Matter of fact, what we're celebrating with that ground floor residential is the fact that you have the old block walls of the original building as the backdrop for your new courtyard, if you happen to reside in that ground floor residential. So I think that given what Chambers and the previous owner have invested into that building to make it its new function that it is now as an insurance brokerage, I can't imagine that much more is going to happen in the short term on that. But that's separate ownership to this project.
Mr. Clausen, any other comments?
I'm just looking at the parking and that. I gather that some of it is parking. The building owner owns some of the parking, and some of the parking will be provided by the town. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was agreed to at the earlier committee of adjustment meeting.
Well, also with the site plan, there was a site plan agreement, and there were a lot of agreements there that I don't wish to get involved in, so I'll leave it at that.
Mrs. Marsh, do you have any questions of the applicants?
I just have a comment. I think the addition of the ground floor residential unit is definitely an asset to this development. I think it's probably something that people are going to, I want to say, be fighting over. It's definitely a great, it looks like it's going to be a really nice development.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. You know, I'm an old parking guy, and I really don't like seeing driveway decreased, especially by 1.5 meters. But I noticed that in the new site plan that's attached to the application, it's basically angled parking. I think somebody with a 250 Ford might have a little difficulty backing around and heading out frontwards, but I would assume over time they're going to learn how to make a good 3-point turn. So I think that as much as I dislike seeing parking driveways widths decreased, I think I can live with this. I think that Mr. Schooley has probably taken the parking driveway templates out, turning radius templates out, and I noticed in one of the reports that he says it will work, so I have to go along with that. Are there any other comments that anyone wishes to make? In that case, hearing no comments, are we ready to render a decision? If so, can I have a mover and a seconder? Mrs. Marsh.
I will move that the application be granted for the minimum two-way driveway width of 6.25 meters, maximum residential gross floor area of 80%, permit a driveway unit behind a commercial, behind a commercial use, maximum lot floor coverage of 48%, be granted for the following reasons: that the variance is minor in nature as the parking area is functional. The proposal will not negatively affect the appearance of the building, and there's enough space for parking, pedestrian, and amenity space, that the intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained, that the official plan is maintained, the proposed site is desirable for the land as it allows better use for the parking area, the residential use will support businesses, and the proposal is allowing flexibility in the building design. The application is granted without prejudice to any other application. No objections were received, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meet the Planning Act test for minor variance. The following conditions are required. Building permits are required, and prior to the building permit, to the satisfaction of the chief building official, a record of site condition be submitted, and that to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning, that a revised drawing for the site plan agreement.
Do I have a seconder?
I second it.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And with that, we will now move on to our second application for the evening. This is consent application B11 2020. Application is at 282 Canboro Road. Ms. Wilford, will you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Application for consent file B11/2020P 282 Canboro Road. The subject parcel, shown as Part 3 on the attached sketch, is an interior parcel of land situated 26.21 meters south of Canboro Road, lying east of Effingham Street in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to convey 1,034 meters square of land, Part 3, to merge with the abutting property to the west, 286 Canboro Road, for continued use of the existing single detached residential dwelling. 4,055 meters square of the land, Part 1, will be retained for continued use of the single detached residential dwelling known locally as 282 Canboro Road. To date, the following comments have been received. NPCA. Any works or site alterations within 15 meters of the regulated watercourse traversing 286 Canboro Road will require NPCA approval. No objections. Niagara Region. Merging Part 3 with Part 2 will benefit the ability of the existing dwelling at 286 Canboro Road in the event the septic system needs to be replaced, as the site is impacted by an NPCA regulated watercourse which restricts the development of a new septic system. Archaeological assessments will be required upon future development or site alteration requiring Planning Act approval. No objections, subject to Part 2 merging in title with Part 3. Building Department, no comments. Public Works Department, C, conditions. Hydro 1, no concerns. Bell Canada, no concerns. Public comments were received from 2 neighboring property owners, which are included on the committee's agenda and summarized below. Concern that the future use of the property will be commercial. The subject properties are all zoned CR commercial rule, which permit a variety of commercial uses and accessory residential uses. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal will improve the awkward existing lot geometry and parcel fabric by creating a more usable parcel of land at 286 Canboro Road, either for the continued use of a legal non-conforming single detached dwelling or for some alternative future use, should one be proposed. The remnant land will also continue to comply with the minimum zoning standards and minimum size requirements for a private septic system. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application B11/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant merge Part 3 with Part 2, 286 Canboro Road, provide a revised consent sketch illustrating all existing accessory structures, regardless of whether they are proposed to remain or be removed. If zoning compliance cannot be demonstrated, the applicant shall either apply for and obtain enclosed demolition permits as applicable for their removal, or obtain subsequent zoning approval for their continued existence to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parts, demonstrating the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts adjacent properties, and that all drainage will be contained within their respective lots to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works or designate. Confirm that no existing utilities cross the proposed lot line. In the event that services do cross, the applicant shall be responsible for the costs and responsibility of their relocation and or removal. Provide the Secretary Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the Notice of Decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, and jbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. We do still have the agents in the room. It is still Upper Canada, and it is Ethan who is representing as the agent.
Mr. Lehman, do you have anything you wish to add for the information of the committee?
Good evening, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair, I've read the staff report and I agree with the recommendations and accept the conditions. I just want to reiterate that it's a minor boundary adjustment to facilitate the long-term use of the land as required through the zoning for the private septic system. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Committee members, do you have any questions for the representatives?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a registered member of the public if you wish to move to the public portion of the meeting.
Oh, yes, okay.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for interrupting me, because this is one of those things. Zoom, I'm still not used to it yet. Pre-registered, have they joined?
Yes, thank you. We're just bringing in Mr. Sean Reeves right now into the meeting. And we're just, Mr. Reeves, we do see you. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you'd like to go ahead with your verbal presentation. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Sean Reeves, and I'm the president of Reeves Co. Holdings, Inc. I'm the owner of 284 Canboro Road, the property that abuts the property in question. I reside at 1450 Effingham Street in Ridgeville. When I purchased 284 Canboro, the property zoning was commercial rural, as it is now, as are the surrounding properties, and were considered legal non-conforming. When investigating the commercial designation, I was told there needed to be at least 90 feet of frontage to use the property commercially, that our property, as well as neighboring properties, did not have this frontage, so could only be used residentially. This was an important factor in me purchasing the property and the future consideration of what I was hoping to do with the property. This severance request states for continued residential use, and in theory, I don't object to that. But I suspect that's not the case, and that because the current zoning is not conducive for this. When checking with the town planner, the zoning means that for residential use, the only home construction allowed would be a renovation of the same size and footprint of the current legal non-conforming dwelling. Considering this, the consolidation of the lands that already occurred in 2017 and those being requested at this hearing have no value for continued residential use, other than for the septic issue, and they wouldn't have needed the consolidation that happened in 2017 for the septic. Considering this, it would seem that it's pretty obvious that it is for future commercial consideration. Having a commercial facility beside our dwelling would not only affect the future value, but also the quality of living at the residence. Considering that the only legal use for my property is residential because there's not enough frontage for commercial, and the property would not have commercial value. This would impede the ability for me to sell the property or rent the property at a price that would command without such a facility or a commercial facility being erected right beside it. I've sought legal advice that directed me to voice my concerns for the record should the property be developed as a commercial facility that would impact our property in such a way, especially considering the severance request states specifically for continued residential use. We were also advised to inform both the town and the owner requesting the severance that should this be the case, we are prepared to take action against both parties to stop such a facility or recover damages for depreciation as a result of if such a facility comes to fruition. Again, I'm not completely opposing this as a residential use. I have no issues whatsoever, but I suspect based on all the evidence out there, there really is no logic for the amalgamations of the property in 2017 plus this if the use is for continued use of this very tiny little house.
Mr. Reeves, I've understood your comments. However, this is basically a boundary adjustment. We have no say in what may or may not happen on the property in the future. What I did notice something in the planning report, any future commercial rural zone development on any of the subject properties will be subject to a site plan approval and will require a site plan agreement with the town in accordance with the site plan bylaw. It's also very possible that they're going to have to go through rezoning. So I understand your comments, I understand your concerns, but really they are not relevant to this application. This is basically an application for a boundary adjustment. We have to rely on what's happening. If there's any future development on the merged property, my understanding is it'll have to be undertaken by through site plan control.
I just want to comment that it is valid in the fact that the zoning is already there for commercial, but the property does not have the frontage for commercial as it sits, or the depth, I'm sorry. This property will enable it to meet the requirements for commercial use.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, and we will consider them during our deliberations. That's all I can say. Do you have anything else you wish to offer the committee?
No, that's everything. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. We will just place the resident back in the waiting room where he can still see and watch the meeting. We do not have any other pre-registered members, so I will just check the clerks at pelham.ca email. And Mr. Chair, I can confirm that it is 4:34 and we have not received any emails. And if you wish, you can close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Seeing we have no other people wishing to speak on this application, with the indulgence of the committee, the hearing panel, I'd like to close the public portion of the meeting. Are there any questions from committee members to the representatives? Mrs. Marsh.
I just out of curiosity, I'm just wondering what determined the southerly boundary of part 3 on the sketch, and why wouldn't it be like, as opposed to having an uneven boundary for part 3 there, why was the southerly boundary not extended from the southeast portion of part 2 over to the south west boundary of the property known as 284 Canboro Road? Just out of curiosity.
Mr. Lehman, do you have any anything you wish to offer on this?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the boundary was chosen to ensure that both parcels are at least 1 acre in size, which is a requirement for private septic dilution area for residential lots.
I think we just lost connection.
Does that help you, Mrs. Marsh?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I have a question, but direct it to Curtis for clarification, please. What I'd like to ask Curtis, if 286 is zoned commercial rural and he has legal non-conforming residential, does that prohibit the owner from right now putting a commercial venture onto the property?
Through the chair, for which property?
286.
286. The house would likely have to come through the chair. The house would likely have to come down because there's requirements for private sewage systems, and it would be difficult to support that with another building on the property. So it would really have to come down. I'm not sure if the applicant has anything else they'd like to add.
But now, with the addition of this land, he'll have over an acre, 1.2 acres. And all he needs is a minor variance from us in the future to be able to have a residence and a commercial venture to meet the 1.8 or 1.9 acre requirement to have commercial. He'd still have to come with another minor variance in the future. Is that correct?
Through to the chair, the 1.9 acre requirement is actually a subsection in the commercial rural zone that relates specifically to the permission of accessory residential uses. So that requirement would come into play if they were proposing a commercial with an apartment above or something similar. If it's just a standalone commercial building, the requirement's only 1 acre and 30 meters of frontage. So it could hypothetically comply as of right, subject to site plan approval. If they were proposing a mixed use building, then they would certainly need some type of zoning relief.
Okay.
Whether that be through the Committee of Adjustment or through council.
But it is important that he meet the 1 acre requirement, but with this consent that he's asking us for today, that would give him a total different perspective now that he's over an acre for sewage treatment later. Is that correct, Curtis?
Through the chair, I mean, if it's a question, I mean, it's, yeah, the remnant parcel, as the applicant pointed out, has to be 4,000 square meters, and that was to satisfy the region. And the severed parcel is consolidating to exceed 1 acre. And from what we can understand from the region's comments, they actually prefer Part 3 merge with Part 2 because Part 2 is restricted due to a regulated water course. So even though it was already over an acre, it wasn't fully usable for a septic system. So with Part 3 merging with Part 2, it's actually helping that matter in the event that it needs to be replaced for the existing house.
Fine. Sorry, Don, but that's, to me, when I was reading the thing, I would need that Part 3 if I ever wanted to in the future do something with my sewage system. That's all I wanted. The owner, that the person that was speaking against it, I mean, he came up with a statement, but I think he never looked at the fact that the owner might be wanting it just so he could revise his sewer system. And that would be a very, for the region, well, I have read it, I can understand why they supported it.
Yes.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Are there any other comments or questions of the committee? Hearing no comments or questions, can committee ready to render a decision on this application? If so, can I have a mover and a seconder? Mr. Clausen.
I move that we grant the consent and that we make this decision based on the following conditions, and that to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, that the owner submits an overall lot grading and drainage plan, and that he confirms there's no utilities crossing the proposed lot lines. And also to the satisfaction of Director of Community and Planning and Development, He submits a sketch showing all existing accessory buildings and proposed and those to remain. And to the satisfaction of the Secretary Treasurer, Part 3 is to merge with Part 2, as solicitor's written undertaking is required, and that the Secretary Treasurer be provided with a registered legal description, copy of the deposit reference plan, and of course the final certification fee of $395. And we based our decision on the following reason. The applicant is aware that the additional zoning applications may be required for accessory building uses, and or that demolitions permits may be required if zoning compliance can't be achieved. 2, the application conforms to the policies of the town of Pelham, the official plan, the regional policy plan, and provincial policy statement, and also complies with the town's zoning bylaw. 3, the decision is rendered having regard to the provisions of section 51 bracket 24 and 51 bracket 25 of the Planning Act as amended. And we, the committee of adjustment, we've considered all the written and oral submissions that have been provided to us and find that it's subject to the conditions of provisional consent. This application meets Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. So moved. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. And we will continue on with our meeting. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the meeting of September the 1st, 2020. Do I have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes as prepared?
Moved by
Mrs. Marsh, seconded by Mr. Clausen.
Yeah, I second.
All in favor? Carried. Second item is minutes of November 3rd, 2020. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Let me get to
Authorizing minutes as prepared. And the revised agenda is received today.
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the minutes. I got the revised agenda. I read through that, which gave all the reasons not for that Cream Street project. Okay.
Thank you. Seconder, Mrs. Marsh, all in favor? Carried. With that being said, we're moving to our next item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Oh, could I ask you?
Mr. Clausen moves adjournment.
Didn't we have a new member in the committee? Is there any chance we could meet her today? I understand she's here watching this. We should say at least hello.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would defer that to Ms. Nancy Bizzato.
Oh.
Nancy.
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
My computer was making that whirly noise, so I turned my my mic off. Sorry. I think it's fine if we'd like to greet our new member, and as long as we don't conduct any business, that's fine. I have no objection to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, Nancy, did you want to conclude out the meeting and stop the recording and the live stream and then introduce the members, or did you want that to be done, recorded, and live streamed?
You can adjourn the formal portion if everybody wants to just stay on the meeting for a moment, and we'll meet our new member and welcome her aboard, and she'll be participating in the next couple as an observer as well.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
And I'll second that.
All in favor? The formal portion of the meeting is done.
Thank you. Just give me a moment to stop the live stream. It does take a minute, and to stop the recording as well. And Ms. Leach will